Hey, hey, hey.
Hi, look at you taking the advice of fading the music out.
I was trying. I'm actually literally on the volume. I'm literally I'm literally on the volume trying to figure some things ew, that's dirty. Figure some things out. How are you, Kay? Kay won't be on camera today. How are you, Kay?
I am doing well. Nothing new. Trying to stay cool. How are you?
I am doing well. On Sunday, um I fell asleep on the couch watching Ben 10, and I thought I woke up, but I wasn't awake, but I could see my entire living room. And I saw this thing. I'm pretty sure it's just like a demonic entity just bouncing all around. And if I were a child, I would be so scared, and it was raining really hard. I would be so scared. I got up, turned off the TV, turned off the light, walk upstairs, and went straight to bed.
You're like,
So
whatever.
yeah, if this is how I go, this is how I go. So I literally didn't care. I was telling my family, and I was just like, I don't care. How are you, Petty?
Um, that's called astral projection, and the next step is lucid dreaming. So you can go and fly in other people's homes and mess with them. Um, I'm tired. Work is working. A lot of janitoring this week. I've learned to mop in circles, which is better cleaning pattern, and I think this is what I'm going to need to get the promotion. So, um, I'm looking forward to the future.
Oh,
So everyone is saying my face is shiny, and I think the reason is because um, Kay is not on to show her glow, and Petty doesn't. Petty decided today was not the day he was going to moisturize and be shining. So I look out of place, but I promise it's not out of place. It's glow. It's not shiny.
I think you have your usual level of glow.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying. It just looks out of place because Petty's usually glowing too.
Yeah, like I think when Pay is in the blue light and you have the warmer light, it just makes more of a contrast.
Sunlight is better for you.
Period.
I've allowed
Um,
it.
Before we start, there's something. Hey, everyone in the chat, we can't be ignoring the chat. I wanted to show y'all something. I think I sent it to the group, but I don't know if you watched it. I hope y'all didn't watch it. Um, I saw this and my anxiety was through the roof. So I decided, let me show it to you. Hopefully the sound doesn't come on. Do you see? Do you see that?
Oh my god.
That is a mess. Like my anxiety was, I don't know why, but like I've rewatched it so many times and I'm just like, I would just die. I would literally just die if I had to do something like this. So
Yeah, I watch those videos sometimes too, like on TikTok of the people with the cameras biking or whatever. And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, there is no possible way because just watching the video makes me anxious.
yeah. I mean that's I get my adrenaline rush from watching it, so I don't have to get to get an adrenaline rush. But there is something that I wanted to talk about. So you remember the last stream we did? We were up here talking about how Gen Z. What are you, Prince Petty? You're Gen Z.
I have no idea. Probably the 17. How many? How old is Gen Z?
Anywho, so we were arguing because last week we said Gen Z didn't do anything. Remember, we were arguing about that. You want to remember what you said? You remember
Yeah,
what you said?
the black squares.
Yeah, let's play a little bit again. Because today we're going to go into deconstruction and this young lady online fighting for the right to be late. But let me play a little bit of what you said, just so we're on the same page.
access and ability to communicate. Like, you know, the younger generation does a lot of that more so than like older generations. But okay, now what? Like, I'm not saying that they don't do anything. I'm not saying that. But a lot of times I think that people equate talking about something equal to like doing something about something. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, talking about things is very important. It's important to bring awareness and all that, but like a lot of things have to be happening at the same time. And again, I'm not saying that that's not what people are doing. Like some people are doing that, but I think that there's a higher amount of people now who think just talking about it is the thing that needs to be done, and then that's it.
So
like,
y'all don't believe in the...
Do not read, wait, Petty, do not read that private chat out loud. After y'all figure that out, then y'all can talk to me. Continue.
So y'all don't believe in the y'all don't believe in the black square, the Twitter blackout?
You want to know something? I was going to say it, and then I felt so bad because I don't want to actually drag. I actually really like your generation, and so I didn't want to completely drag it. I was like, I don't want that's mean. And then the thing I put behind the scene right now, I was going to drag them on that, but I was like, you know what? I really, because I actually do like what's your generation?
Gen Z.
Gen Z. Yeah, like I'm here for this. But girl, until y'all resolve that behind the scenes that I just told you, you don't get to talk to me about deconstruction.
I reject the critique about us doing less, by the way. Unless you're specifically describing it as like, I don't know.
What have y'all done?
Look, didn't I just say?
No. Please explain to me what y'all have.
Didn't I just say about the black square? Y'all don't remember? So everybody forgot about the black square. Also, in Washington D.C., they painted a road rainbow. What generation doesn't have progress? So you think all of this is just meaningless?
Period. I think everything I said back. The black square did it for me. For every one of those people online who changed their profile to the black square in solidarity with black people, thank you. All right. So you said your generation were doing things, right?
Yeah.
And you stand by that.
Oh yeah, sure.
So one of the things you guys were doing is that you guys were asking for accommodation. So I'm going to play this video of this young lady fighting for y'all's right, and let's discuss her, okay?
So I just got yelled at for asking a very reasonable question. So I'm applying to go somewhere, and I just wanted to know, are there accommodations for people who struggle with time blindness and being on time, you know? And then the person I was with interrupted and acted like I was asking something else. And then when we were done, they actually started yelling at me and saying that accommodations for time blindness doesn't exist. And if you struggle with being on time, you'll never be able to get a job, you know, provided you're trying your absolute best to be there. And then they're like, your stupid generation wants to destroy the workplace. And yeah, I think that a culture where workers are just cut off because they struggle with being on time, when there's other solutions that we can look to, I think that just anybody who thinks it's okay to just treat people like that, yeah, that culture needs to be dismantled. And then I asked that person, how can you feel good about yourself upholding this kind of system? And then to think I'm entitled. No, if people think it's okay to treat others like this, that's entitlement.
Sorry, I'm trying. Wait.
What would like the accommodation? I mean, because I get it. Like, I definitely have a hard time being on time. Like, I have to, you know, set multiple alarms, do all these things. But like, that's what I have to do. I'm trying to figure out what would the accommodation be at like a place of employment. Like, what would they do?
Patty, come defend your people.
I'm not sure the premise. So, time blindness is what is it?
Time blindness can be a symptom of ADHD, or it can be found among people on the autism spectrum. But time blindness itself is not a diagnosis. I've spoke to two psychologists and my own therapist regarding this. It is not diagnosable. Everyone experiences the loss of time. When you're studying or doing something that you really like and you zone out, you're in the zone or in a quote unquote flow state. It's actually really good if you can get into this flow state when you're focusing, because it helps with focusing. However, it is not something like you are diagnosed with. It just happens to people who have ADHD sometimes, but everyone, we forget the time sometimes. And what we do to not oversleep or to not forget a schedule that we might have is we put it down on a calendar, we set alarms. We have to work around our perception of time, which is not usually good to get where we need to go. But she is saying that these employers should reformat how they do tardiness in an effort to accommodate her, as opposed to her setting, I don't know, alarms to make sure she's at work on time, or in this case, in class at time on
So,
time.
so is it something that like has a strong link with ADHD, or just anyone ever has it, and there is no strong correlation with autism or anything like that?
It is strong with people who are I'm using this word very loosely, but disorganized. And so ADHD might be it would be higher for people with ADHD. But again, it's not something that is you can be diagnosed with. It's just one symptom of many.
Is that something that's common in like one race compared to the other? Like, is it more or less common in African American?
I don't know, but I do know we have the CP time thing. I don't know how true that is, but to the extent it is true, then sure. But I don't think it is. It is.
I don't know how reasonable an accommodation would be. Maybe like a 5-minute grace period that would apply to workers generally, or I'm not sure if you would just people who have made you aware that they have ADHD. And
Wait, before we go there, are you saying this is reasonable?
I think it can be. It depends on the work. Like if you work at McDonald's, probably if you work as a neurosurgeon and something that's really time sensitive and requires a very like an extremely consistent person as far as showing up exactly on time or early. I don't think it would be reasonable in a field like that.
All right, let's hear her story behind this, because we need to get into it. This is why she's going to explain herself some more, because I want to drag, but I'm going to wait off a little bit before, because I feel like this is just her putting off her irresponsibleness onto other people. So maybe I'm wrong.
There's been a lot of lies and rumors circulating about me for a while now, so I decided, let me go ahead and give the story behind my time blindness video. I was applying for a trade school, and I was with my mom, and we were on a phone call. And apparently, you were out of the program if you were late 4 times. So I need to know, are there accommodations for ADHD time blindness? Because I needed to know that, because if no, then that would need to be a factor in my decision whether or not to go. Now, let's be real. When I posted the video, I figured everybody would know I was referring to ADHD time blindness. I really was not in tune to how little neurotypicals know about neurodiversity and the ableism, let's be real. But on the story, my mom lashed out at me. Now, she's a great mom and I love her, but everybody makes mistakes. And I just wanted to vent about it online because I'm tired of this neurotypical society who does not see your struggles.
That's it. I'm doing it. I'm getting dreadlocked.
All right. Before I go, do you guys does that change anything else for you?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I can see her wanting to know, like, you know, it's not bad that she asked, but I don't think that she can be like, ooh, I'm getting discriminated against if they don't accommodate, because they already accommodated by giving, you know, however many they give. So she would have to kind of try to plan around that. So
yeah. All right, go ahead.
I mean, I at least appreciate that she reaches out to her supposed future employer and says this is an accommodation that I would need, as opposed to already being there and then just being late. And then, like, I mean, I can at least find that admirable.
Yeah. You still want to drag? You still want to drag?
No, I am being tempered by you both, which is good, because as a potential employer, all I hear is I don't want to be held accountable to showing up on time. She said this was for a trade school. She was calling a trade school. It sounded like her mom wanted her out of the house and wanted her to go get a job. But she's on the phone with her mom with this trade school. And she goes and asks, hey, what are the accommodations for time blindness? And I don't know what the answers were, but the mom got upset with her, like, girl, why are you doing this? Why are you asking about time blindness? Like, just set an alarm. And she got upset and she came to vent on the internet, also saying that neurotypical don't know about neurodivergent and it's a bit ableist, but I don't think ignorance is ableist, but that's neither here nor there. She can believe what she want to believe. So it seems like she don't want to get out of the house is what I'm getting. But go ahead.
I feel like it's, I actually feel like she's being pretty reasonable. I would liken it to like I'm doing a job interview and I'm like, hey, I'm like a consistently late person. Is this the type of job where I have some form of flexibility? Is time a stringent thing? Is there any type of workaround we can do for that? I feel like that's pretty reasonable, even though maybe it's her language, or I'm not sure. I don't know that that's something I would, isn't it something like 30? I think 30, I'm not sure, so don't quote me. 30% of people are consistently late to work. Maybe that's just something that could be general instead of specifically for ADHD people. And of course, it would benefit them disproportionately, which I don't think would be bad. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like a big deal to me.
Well, what doesn't seem like a big deal?
I'm going to be consistently late. Like, it feels like a large portion of the population does that already.
All right, good. This is where I wanted the conversation to go. Do you think it is reasonable to expect your employees to be consistently late?
Depends on the amount of tardiness, probably.
Like, no, but consistently.
Sure. I mean, again, I think it depends on the employer too. So if there's a job that requires very stringent timeliness. No,
even if it doesn't require, we just have a time for which you should be where you're supposed to be. There is a question about value added versus having to show up. And I'm in that debate. But it feels like, as opposed to maybe changing the schedule for you, that you're just going to be late. And the idea that ex ante, you know you're going to be late, even though you don't have any plans the day before, you don't have any reason to be late, you are just going to be late, feels like something you should be planning for.
How do we, so is the accommodation she's asking for is you will allow me to be late every day to work or consistently to work?
She said she was asking for 15 minutes grace period in one of her other videos. She said, all I was trying to do was ask for a 15-minute grace period.
But even if you ask for a 15-minute grace period, which I know this from experience, because there is a grace period at my job, like it's the same thing. Like then it just becomes hard to make it on time to the new time. Like it's still something you have to plan for, like on your own. Like if you get an extra 5 minutes and you know you got an extra 5 minutes, then it's like you didn't even get 5 minutes because you're still gonna, the time blindness doesn't just go away just because you now have an extra 5 minutes.
Yeah, and the question is, who is responsible? This is ultimate. I'm going to play the video where she's explaining what she wanted. Who is responsible for managing her time, right? Let me read this. If you can't meet the standards, the job isn't for you. That's how I see it. Adjust to the schedule. Some are not early people. And my thing is, like, obviously we need to make sure not everyone, but people in society can function. So depending on the circumstances, we have to adjust for certain kinds of people. That's fine. But Kay just pointed out a problem. even if you adjust it to a 15 minutes grace period, if you are saying you don't know how to show up on time, it feels like the 15 minutes grace period is going to change the time for which you should come in, and then you're going to be late for that too.
Yeah.
I don't know how a grace period impacts a person. I don't know if it makes them show up later or not. If it does, then I mean, I guess it would be reasonable to say no, we don't do that.
It's just that, like, if you have this thing where you are struggling with time management, which is understandable, having those grace periods will work for some people. But I think if it's to the extent that she's saying, like the way that I'm perceiving her time blindness to be, I don't know if that will work for her. I mean, I don't know, or maybe it will work, but that
Yeah,
was the first thing I thought.
I'm trying to step into your, like, to me, the accommodation sounds like kind of similar maybe to autism accommodations. I guess maybe due to the overlap of diagnosis with ADHD and autism. But it seems like maybe being a kind or decent team leader, insofar as the grace period being an idea around something like that, maybe something like a longer delivery period, or someone in charge who you go to explain or ask how to manage something or what priorities should be, daily reminders or catch-ups or a weekly reminder. So that sounds like kind of just being a kind or decent team leader. And I don't know what impact that has on a company.
But all right, let's try to create a society. Whose responsibility would you make it to show up on time?
I suppose the worker, maybe. No, I would say the worker.
And if you become flexible with the schedule regarding time to show up, do you think that will encourage people to show up on time, or for people to be more loose with when they would show up? So if we start making this exception, because time blindness is not diagnosable, right? So, and you wouldn't limit it to just ADHD or people on the sort of autism spectrum. If we start saying, oh, time blindness is something that we should accommodate, what I feel like that sends a really bad message. Again, the separate question is about whether or not people should have to show up at all to get the work done, which I would be on the side of, if I don't need to physically be there, why are you forcing me to be there? But as to like the standard that you need to show up at this time, it feels like when you don't show up at this time, you leave other people to pick up your slack. And that's the part that I don't appreciate.
That could be, but I don't think this is necessarily the first time we've made an accommodation for someone who's unable to meet the standard at.
Wait, pause. That's the question. Unable or unwilling?
For ADHD people or people generally?
Both.
I don't know. I don't know the research on it and whether or not it's actually like a neurotypical something. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, all the psychologists says this, that like this is something that you can work around.
Do the workarounds have to do with people being accommodating or something you can do?
No,
Both?
it's just that they said. So let me find the thing. Some of the how does time blindness are tips to overcome time blindness. Set a timer on your phone or another device to alert you when it's time to move on. Be mindful of when you're about to engage in an activity that tends to keep your focus. Try to avoid those activities when you don't have time for them, like before bed or before you need to leave for an appointment. Try the if then technique. Set a goal for yourself to reach, like making dinner. If you do that, then you'll do the next thing on your list, like read 2 chapters of a good book. So it is saying set an alarm and don't engage in activities that will take up too much of your time if you have another activity planned.
Yeah, I mean, sure, that's reasonable.
So if these are the suggestions by the psychologist, it feels like this falls squarely in the hands of the people who are quote unquote experiencing time blindness.
Sure.
I mean, I think it goes to like what Petty was saying earlier. Like, I think it's fine to maybe let your employer or whoever know that this is something that you struggle with, just so that they're aware. But you
Is
make
it me or
sure.
did you?
Oh,
You went
I
out
think.
just now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I also do think that you need to, like you were saying, do these different strategies to help so that you will be on time. But I do think it's fair to let your employer know if this is something that you consistently struggle with. So maybe that, they can be more understanding of your situation. But I mean, like you said, if you're not required to be there, then okay, fine. Like, why is there this strict time period if you're not required to be there to like get the job done? But if it is a job or a situation where you have to be there, I think you definitely have to take that responsibility on your own to make sure you can get there on time or as timely as you possibly can and get whatever you need to get done.
As an employee, I would benefit from accommodations around time blindness. However, it feels like people are just making stuff up to get away with not having to be accountable. And this is also part of the deconstruction conversation that we were having, but I will get into that in a moment. Accommodations create more space for accountability, not less. Neurodivergent people usually strive to outperform their peers. I don't know if this is true for all for like as a general statement, so I can't respond to this. But I do find it odd because she's using neurodivergence and ADHD, which we cannot confirm, as her excuse. But time blindness is not itself ADHD. And everyone experience this, and we have to hold ourselves accountable to show up on time. So to expect that the entire world is going to reformat, I don't think that's a bad thing, but we have to do a uh, the sort of benefit analysis. Is it better for the world to shift in this way for accommodation? Will that cause more or less problems? That's kind of how I am looking at it. And it feels like it's going to cause more problems, particularly when this is not something that's like readily diagnosable. Because to be fair, if they do this, I'm gonna walk in and say I have time blindness. Like, let's be very clear. If employers start accommodating for time blindness, I'm going to show up with it. It is what it is. I think a flexible schedule is a great resolution. Provide a window for which one arrives where duty hours start from there. One arrives where duty hours start from there. Well, I feel like that's something you can do for yourself, right? Like you can, if you need to be at work at 9 for a call, you can set everything to show up at like 8:30. Like, I don't know. But let's hear what she wanted. Let's do that. Thank you, 2Ls.
So this is something that you guys have been asking for a while now, and I just want to apologize for not answering it sooner. So honestly, when I was asking, what I was hoping for was a 15-minute window and more times you're allowed to be late. And after that video came out, people have stitched and given some really good advice about even more accommodations, like having an expectation time that I didn't think of. They also gave tips on how to utilize clocks and alarms even more so than I already was. So did I make the video because I'm selfish and I think that everyone must bend their time to me because I don't respect anyone's time? No. I just think that schools and businesses have a higher obligation to God, and I think that their first responsibility needs to be to care for other people. And if those people are struggling, then they need to reach out to them and ask, okay, how can we help you? What can we do to work on this? So I just think that other people's struggles and getting them help needs to come before profit. Do I think that them and their time doesn't matter either? Absolutely not.
My instinct is telling me she's just lazy. And this is wrong, obviously. And I don't want to just be like, you are lazy, figure it out. It seems, and I went through a bunch of her videos, so I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. She says a whole bunch of conflicting things. I will show some if you want, but I did pull them up. My issue is, it feels like we are trying to change the way society operates. I think that is a good thing, and it can be a good thing. However, um, I think we need to think about the end results often, and I don't want to be like the the boomers who are like yelling that our generation or the next generation is lazy and they don't care about anything. But I feel like I'm wrong about this. So please explain to me why I shouldn't be just saying this is annoying. And go ahead. You're muted.
I guess you can look at maybe unintended consequences of this, which one of the super chats said, but I can't see it anymore. But they were suggesting that neurodivergent people are like actually hard workers, and that something like time blindness accommodation would encourage them to work harder, which I don't see that being like too far-fetched. The idea that if you're
Wait, can I ask a question? Why do people make these statements? Like, is it true that neurodivergent people are hard workers? Like that feels
I
like
don't know. I'm not saying
yeah,
it's true or false. I'm saying that's why I say as an unintended consequence, right? Something that we may not know would happen from it. But like the idea that just even as an anecdote in school, I would have friends who are late and they know if they're late to certain teacher classes that they're going to be locked out and sent to detention or something like extremely harsh. So they just stop by McDonald's, get their breakfast, and they're like, well, if I'm going to be late, I might as well be extremely late and miss all of first period, or I might as well just go home and come back tomorrow. Whereas if there's this type of flexible teacher who's like, hey, once the bell rings, I'll give you guys like 30 seconds to get in that door. That might incentivize people, even if they're late, to make some sort of effort to coming to work. So maybe that could lead to a more positive environment. Maybe not. I don't know.
wait, so my mind does not work that way.
I get what Petty is saying. I think,
Go ahead.
I mean, I get what Petty is saying because I just like earlier when
It cut out.
can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
Just like earlier when we talked about the grace period, like sometimes that's going to help some people and sometimes it's just going to push the new time to another time that's going to be hard for somebody to make it to. So, I mean, I can see how it would help some people and it wouldn't help some people, but I have no problem with like accommodations that are going to help more people if these accommodations are reasonable and like, you know, can be done. Like Petty was saying earlier, you can't really do that well in certain career fields and things like that because someone has to be there at a certain time or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think the girl was wrong for asking. I just think that, like you said, Themis, it seems like one of those things where we kind of want to restructure how society is, which would be a good thing. But it's like, how can we go about doing that in a way that's going to be, I don't know, beneficial or in a way that's going to be fair, that's not going to cause more problems or whatever the case may be. Yeah, because, yeah, I don't
You're
know.
being needlessly callous, respectfully. I have ADHD. There's a ton of internal pressure to perform. I feel like it's weird when people don't know if I am neurodivergent or not to say
Right.
things like this. Or if anyone else on the panel is neurodivergent. The idea that neurodivergence shows up one specific way is a huge problem for me in the way that we talk about stuff like this. And the blanket statement is inaccurate that neurodivergents are hard workers in the same way that we would say neurotypicals or hard workers would be wrong, or neurotypicals are lazy would be wrong as a sort of general statement. I don't understand because usually the question is about what would be more difficult to do. If the therapist, and I'm not talking, I think there is a tendency to think about questions around neurodivergence in very broad strokes. So you're saying if you don't create accommodation for this thing, you won't create it for every other thing. To do that is reductive. it doesn't engage fully with the prompt. And to engage fully with the prompt is to say, this specific thing, time blindness, is not recognized as itself neurodivergence, though it is linked to certain kinds of neurodivergent people. The therapist and psychologist says the way around this is to set alarms, something that other people do sort of normally, and to try to keep a schedule and to not engage in activities at the time or right before you are supposed to do something else. This is called keeping a schedule, right? So it feels like we are completely ignoring the actual science behind, or at least the science that the psychologists put forward behind how you move from one thing to the other without sort of being late for the new thing. So that's how I am approaching it. But maybe my favorite magazines say that people with ADHD have a disconnect between intentions and actions. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Petty. I think you were trying to say something.
Oh no, that was it. And my comment wasn't specifically like my friend who's late to school a lot. He's not neurodivergent to my knowledge. Just like something that I think generally people, if they're already late, might just throw the whole thing out, versus if there's more of a grace period and they know they're not going to be punished as harshly, they might be more willing to go in a little late, as opposed to like throw the whole day's productivity away or be extremely late.
Yeah. And then also I think about how everyone doesn't have the same access to being diagnosed with certain things, and how that can play a factor as well. Like you were saying, Themis, about like who know, like not who knows, but like people make assumptions about who is and who isn't neurodivergent without actually knowing. And also people who may be neurodivergent have absolutely no idea why they've been struggling with certain things their whole life. They've never been diagnosed. They've never talked to anyone about it. It's just quote unquote how they are, and they've just like accepted that. So like with that being the case, I don't know like the way that this can be I guess like fairly done across the board, considering that everyone doesn't have the same access to being diagnosed with certain things like autism or ADHD, because they really just started diagnosing certain people. Like it used to just be like boys that were getting diagnosed as autistic and things like that, more so in the past than now. So like just thinking about that, I just think there's a lot that could go into this, and a lot of like areas where, you know, it might get sticky or whatever. But in general, I liked the suggestions that some people had about like flexible time windows and things like that. Grace periods, like those can benefit everyone, neurodivergent or not. So I think those can always be good, but yeah.
So when I was growing, well, I'm not really, it's not worth to like discuss this too directly, but what I found useful is when I have something that is considered a flaw, to not use it as a crutch. And I'm not saying everyone needs to do this, but I find it, for me personally, more empowering to work around what would be considered by larger society a handicap. And work in that way. So I'm not saying everyone should do this. I'm not saying pull yourself up by your bootstraps or whatever. But it does feel odd that the consensus is about restructuring society, particularly when that society, unless we're saying it's not working well for a large number of people, but if it is working well, if you are thinking about restructuring, it doesn't feel like the restructuring is being considered in terms of the larger society. It's being considered only in terms of my own comfort, right? And so I don't advocate for things just to make myself comfortable. I work around my quote unquote handicaps in an effort to be part of a positive contributor, not just to use my issues as a sort of excuse for why I can achieve. And I find that we often lean into our quote unquote faults
So
and blame them.
you're not a supporter of the wheelchair ramp,
Oh, I am.
even though it only like it doesn't only benefit people in wheelchairs, but obviously I feel like it is something selfish insofar as this is only necessary for you, right?
How else would you get in the building?
You don't think people in wheelchairs wheelchair people sounds extremely rude. People in wheelchairs can get up steps. I'm not
I
saying
mean,
it'll be easy at all, but I think it's possible, even though it'll be
right,
harder than
the
someone with a
benefit in creating a ramp outweighs the detriment. Like, why not create a ramp? Like, there's no,
yeah.
like,
So
I can't really think about like a bad thing. Like, I think
wouldn't
it
it
would
cost
be.
the company?
Hmm?
Can't stuff like that, including like maybe installing elevators in a workplace, for example, too. Can't stuff like that be like extremely costly on a company,
It can
especially if
be,
it's
but I think you can wait. Like, it would the thing is, I don't disregard the input of people who might be disabled in certain ways. Like, they can be really amazing contributors. So why would you prevent them from access?
okay. So when it comes to the time blindness thing, if there's like research to indicate that maybe even though
Do you
this
know what
would be
wait, no. Do you know what the least cost avoider is?
the least what?
Cost avoider.
Nope.
Who would it cost more for the wheelchair person? Would it be more detrimental for the person in a wheelchair to access a building without the ramp, or would it cost more or less if the company created the ramp for the wheelchair person? Which one would be, from a utilitarian perspective, more useful and cause less harm?
I don't understand. You're saying who does the company benefit? Does the wheelchair person benefit, or neither, or
Yeah,
both?
which one would be more costly to society? The person in a wheelchair, sorry, trying to access a building without a ramp, or just creating the ramp there?
I'm not sure. I think it would have to do with how much the company makes, or is it the company is excluded? It's just the individual person in society, but not the
Yeah, no,
company.
in almost every situation, it would be easier for the company to create the ramp than the person in the wheelchair to have to figure out their way and cause a disruption, people helping them in or whatever, because they can go in by themselves with the ramp.
How do you?
However,
I was going to ask, how do you weigh the cost of that?
how much does it cost to put a ramp?
I have no
Make
clue.
up a number.
75 million.
Sure. How many people can use that ramp when it's up? An unlimited amount. How easy is it then? If you're calculating two things, wouldn't it be easier to create a ramp where everyone can use it, wheelchair or no wheelchair? Or would it be easier for a person in a wheelchair, every single person in a wheelchair, to come in and try to figure out how to go up and down a step? All right, we figured that out. Now take time blindness. If time is money in this capitalistic world, I shouldn't do it like this, I'm joking. Who would it serve? Like, who has the harder burden in fixing or addressing the time blindness? Does the company have an easier time, or does the individual have an easier time in addressing the time blindness?
See, the thing about that, because I agree, like, make it whatever's the most accessible, right? Having the ramp, like, people who don't need the ramp can still use the ramp. Like, it's fine. With the time blindness situation, which, is absolutely a real thing. I just, if there's that grace period, I think that's a good idea. But then are people going to be mad when they show up to Walmart and like nobody is there when it's opened and they're just like, well, people can come 15 minutes. As long as everybody in society is like okay with the things that can result from having these like universal grace periods, places of employment, I mean, I think that's fine. Like, as long as everyone will be understanding and it's not going to cause any issues. And hopefully other people would just step up and, you know, it wouldn't create an issue. But I don't know. I think sometimes people forget that, like, if you're trying to, I don't know, have your doctor's appointment or whatever at 5 o'clock and you get there and then the doctor's like, well, you know, I couldn't make it until 5:30. Everybody is not going to be okay with that. So, like, and, you know, understandably. So, like, where does the line get drawn, I guess, would be the problem that I could see happening. Especially, I get that we are championing for like a change in society, because I agree, but practically, like, in terms of just how is this going to work out day to day, is everyone going to be okay with waiting 15 to 30 minutes for whatever thing that they're going to do because employees might or might not be there? I don't know.
I don't think
I
Walmart.
have issues with being on time because commuting gave me anxiety. Public transportation in my area was risky. How would I fix this? Anxiety stems from accidents and violence on public transport. I don't think it's a matter of quote unquote fixing it, right? Like, I think, I mean, I think it's complicated. This is not what you were saying now. The anxiety. Oh, my computer is dying. I'm sorry. There we go. The anxiety that you feel, and the unwillingness to get in certain kind of transportation, I think speaks to a bigger issue of accessibility, right? And considering that time blindness itself is a symptom that can be managed very directly, it seems odd that accommodations, and I'm not saying it shouldn't, it seems odd that we would make accommodations for that specifically when the negative externalities from you addressing yourself they're so low, right? And but when I said the least cost avoider, or the cheapest cost avoider is kind of what they do in negligence. It's about externalities and negative externalities. And if the company engage in this way, is it beneficial for the company? Doesn't really matter. But could it cause more harm than good? And the argument here is, well, probably, because on the individual side, the thing that you should do is something that we as a society say is a good thing, which is, I don't know, keep a schedule, use alarms. So it feels like an easy fix. An easy fix, by the way, doesn't mean that it's completely without its mental hurdles, but that's what the psychologists who are good at this are telling people to do.
So, when you say that this is what the psychologists say, has there been research as far as, like, is time blindness just people not setting alarms?
It's more than just not setting alarms, but yes, it is about zoning out. So if we go to define what time blindness is, let me go to the psychology, the Cleveland Clinic psychology page. All right. So it says, time blindness, it happens to all of us. We're deep in conversation with a good friend and time just melts away. Or you meant to watch an episode of a TV show before bed. Now you've somehow wound up thick in the third season and it's almost time to get ready for work. And skewed perception of time happens to everyone at some time. And it's harder for people with ADHD to keep track of time. That is particularly difficult. Some people call it time blindness. It's a natural consequence of hyperfocus or becoming so engrossed in an activity that you block out everything else around you. The passing of time goes faster when you are engaging in something you enjoy, and it can seem to come to a standstill when you're scrubbing the floor, blah, 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 blah. We talked to Dr. Manos about the way our brain become engrossed in certain activity and how that allows time to slip away, leaving us time blind. Yeah. So it's not like an actual diagnosis. It's a symptom of people who can become hyper focus. And the way you break that hyper focus is set an alarm.
I don't know. It seems kind of unreasonable to expect three-dimensional creatures to navigate 4D. I feel like that's an unreasonable request, personally.
There's time blindness apply when it's time to clock out. I'm trying to see something. Okay, it doesn't actually. What I just read, and this is a problem, and this is why I think people are playing in our faces. But when you're enjoying something, time tends to slip away. When you're not enjoying something, it feels like time is just stuck. And you look up, you feel like you've been working for an hour, and you look up and it's only 2 minutes. So no, when you want to go home, you don't, unless you're like super focused, right? And enjoying. But as a general matter, people are not time blind when it's time to go home.
So you think companies would benefit from making the workplace an enjoyable place to be? And then people would get like lost in it.
Yeah, but I don't think so. This is part of the problem, right? I think there is this question about corporate responsibility, not just to society, but to its employee. And the issue that I fundamentally have with this query is we don't have even negotiating power. And we can't demand for companies who have a profit motive to care about the humans in there. To the extent it lends to their profit, then yes, we should. And we have structured society in a way where corporate profit is the ultimate benefit for engaging in work. With that as the bottom line, companies are going to do whatever they want to do. And how we negotiate in this is important. However, if you're coming to the negotiating table, I hope you're coming with something better than time blindness. Like, it feels like this is kind of reductive.
You don't think time blindness accommodations, again, you guys have already said this, but you don't think it would be positive for the employer?
I don't think it would be positive for the employer or the employee.
And the accommodation we're specifically talking about seems to be like a flexible starting time or grace period.
I think you can have a flexible starting point, but the reason you give for that should not be time blindness.
Okay. What should be the reason?
No, I'm not trying to prescribe the reason. The reason it shouldn't be time blindness is because you not being able to show up on time is a problem. It is a problem for me if I am depending on you in an employment setting to be somewhere, and I can't rely on you to show up to that thing consistently. However, I can see having flexible starting time if you being there at a certain time is not completely necessary. So if employers are forcing people to show up to an office when they don't actually have to engage in work at this time, but they just want you to be there, then that's just annoying.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like if there's room for someone to be late, because something comes up. I mean, things happen, I don't think there's anything we can do about that. Like there's always going to be someone that's going to be late, can't make it in, whatever the case may be. And that's like kind of case by case, and it comes with like, having a good understanding with whoever your employers are, maybe trying to communicate if you're going to be late like as soon as you can so that they can get something in place, so that you not being there won't affect them as negatively, or whoever the customers are, or whatever the case may be. But like, I don't know, I don't know, I know that we've come on this podcast like 2 minutes late. I've seen people in the chat like, what's going on? Like they're late, and it's like 1 or 2 minutes. So can you imagine if like, and this is a podcast. So can you imagine if it was like businesses and like all of society where people were just, 15 to 30 minutes late all the time? I don't think people would be as understanding and accommodating as they think they would be if this was just happening in their day-to-day lives. Although I do still think that we should find some kind of way to make it so that there are more accommodations for this type of thing. but I don't think that sometimes people look at the full like picture of what this could entail for day-to-day life. Just, in
All
general.
right, let me put myself out there to be critiqued then. I don't like people showing up late. I don't like people. I don't like incompetence. I don't like hard-headedness, which I also suffer from. And so, if I am an employer and you're consistently late, if you are late with an excuse, I don't mind, right? And if you are always late with an excuse, a legitimate excuse, I actually really don't mind. If you are just late, it is a problem. And I don't think it's right for me to lie and say, oh, I understand this. If if the research and if psychologists said this is something that people actually can't get over, that there is no real way to make sure people are on time, then sure, I wouldn't know how to deal with that. And I think it is my human obligation to care for people in that way. But when the psychologist starts saying, set an alarm, yeah, no, I'm not giving you that excuse. Like, I need something more. Like, if the psychologist, the therapist starts saying, what you need to do, even with ADHD, but if we're not just talking about ADHD, this is not something that is diagnosable. It just happens to every human being, everyone. Then I'm going to expect you to show up on time. And even if that means you need to set a time that you are actually not needed, but so that you can show up on time, then that's what you should do. So, drag. Either of you can drag me for that. But that's my honest opinion.
You know, I I don't know. It's not like, again, I'm struggling with this because I know that these neurodivergent struggles are real. Like, I know for a fact they're real.
Oh,
And
me too.
you
The thing is, wait, before you continue, the people in the chat saying ableism, neurodivergent, the fact that y'all don't know anyone it feels like no one knows anyone on the the
yeah,
screen, whether or not people on the screen are neurotypical or neurodivergent. And I find that actually really funny. Continue.
yeah, and ironic, right? Like,
Yeah.
but so I I mean, I know it's real, so I get it. But then on the other hand, it's like, how do you accommodate that in a way that's not just case by case? I think that case by case, it works. I don't know if there's a way to like universally accommodate it in the same way that you can add a wheelchair ramp. Like, I think that that's something you can easily do, that anyone can, walk up the wheelchair ramp, or wheelchairs can go up the wheelchair ramp. But with something like time blindness, I don't know if there's a way to like universally accommodate for that.
Wait, pause. I like that. Is it ableism to say you won't accommodate something that is not like a diagnosed neurodivergence? Like, it feels this is not neurodivergence, so I don't understand why people are saying ableism. Like
And
this,
and then what if you just weren't diagnosed? Like, what if you never got diagnosed as autistic, but or ADHD, and you really struggle with this, and your insurance doesn't cover these psychiatrists and psychologists and all these people and all this testing? Like, I just don't see how. I mean, in a utopia, this would be able to be done. And I think that these types of things should be able to be done. But just like with the way things are right now, I don't see how it could be done fairly and effectively with the way things are right now in society. Not saying it could never happen, because like I said, I think these things should, be able to happen at some point. But I'm just not seeing like a clear path, the way that I see a clear path for like certain other accommodations that can easily be done.
um, Wait, before I read Mokalaks, I mean, Timus, wouldn't it be helpful to identify those kinds of things when discussing topics like this? If not for credibility, but at least relatability, what's wrong with identifying as neurodivergent? I no longer, so I don't know how to explain this. My issue, I'm not new, I guess I am neurodivergent, but my issues I have learned to fix. And I'm not saying I'm like completely great in this, but if you were in the Discord, or we've talked about this in the Discord, but it is odd to me that, like, and maybe this is, someone said internalize ableism, so that's fine, but it's odd to me that you have to disclose something about yourself to express something about time blindness, which is not a neurodivergence. Like, it, like the fact that people are ableism, this is not a neurodivergent. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm so confused by this. Go ahead.
I don't know if it's ableism. I don't think that matters. What would matter is whether or not it's good or bad ableism. If that makes
My
sense.
job has a flexible start time of 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. and people are still late. Period. It's ridiculous. Sorry. Oh, I cut you off. My bad. Prince Betty.
No, that's it.
And, you know, I keep thinking about this diagnosis thing. Like, I think that's a really big deal because, like I've been saying, you know, everyone's not going to have access. Then also on top of that, everyone doesn't want to have this certain diagnosis on their file for whatever reason, you know, which is completely understandable. A lot of people don't take self-diagnosis seriously. Like, there's just so many things, even though you can absolutely, like, in my opinion, you can absolutely self-diagnose some of these things, but like there's just so much that could go into this that I think it's just a really hard thing to universally accommodate for in the same way as something like an elevator or like a wheelchair ramp. I can't, I don't know how. I don't know. Maybe people in the chat have some ideas.
Yeah,
But
you can be neurodivergent and ableist. Whether or not any of the panelists are neurodivergent is irrelevant. Yeah, what is also irrelevant in my book is ableism if you're not talking about neurodivergent. Because this is not about neurodivergent. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, it is an odd thing when we use the isms to close conversation, and that's fine. This might not be the conversation for you, but it is odd when we're talking about like time blindness in this sort of general way, and we're saying, oh, it's ableism if you don't accommodate. Then all the psychologists are ableists. All the therapists essentially are ableists. Like, because the prescription isn't for society yet. Maybe in the future we'll find out this is ableism now, but the prescription is for us to set alarms and to set times beforehand and to not engage in activities that would consume our time when we need to be somewhere else. So it sounds like this is not about ableism. So is it I'm arguing, but time blindness is a symptom. No, it's not. It is. It can be a symptom. That's what is being said.
and it's on a spectrum too, because there are plenty of neurodivergent people who are always early, right? They're going to be there on time. Like, that's like their thing. There are plenty that cannot be on time for, like, no matter what they do. Like, it's really hard. So it's not just like one or the other or anything like that. And that's why I think it's really hard to make like general statements in terms of what neurodivergent or neurotypical people do or don't do in terms of this, because you can be neurodivergent and always be on time. You can be neurodivergent and struggle with time. You can be neurotypical and always be on time. You can be neurotypical and always struggle with time. Like, these things all exist.
And so, yeah, I like this. What about boarding flights? So, what should happen if you are time blind to accommodate you for a flight? Like,
I missed a flight before. Firstly, I know that they close the gate at a certain time. I think it's rare, but sometimes they might allow an accommodation for that, where they'll be like, "Oh, the door's not closed yet," or something, some sort of grace period. And then I think alternatively, they'll do a what's it called when you just board the next flight of that day if there's an
but
available
that's for
seat.
almost anyone, though. Like, if you show up late, that's
Yeah,
not an
so
accommodation.
it's not.
It's not an accommodation for time blindness. Unless being late is time
Sure, but it's
blind.
something that's implemented into airlines that benefits people who suffer from time blindness,
Yeah, but
even if
it's
it's
not
not
an
specifically for
accommodation.
them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's literally what I'm saying. Like, the accommodations aren't for time blindness. And if we're saying we should accommodate time blindness, my question is why? And also, what are the repercussions of that?
So why do people airlines accommodate, I guess, people missing a flight or being late
Because
for a flight?
people miss flights.
So it's like just because it's a regular occurrence that happens, they make an accommodation for it.
Yeah, like it makes sense that if you're selling a business about people going from one place to the other, that you would have something included in there for people who missed it for all kinds of reason. And it could be arbitrary in the way that you decide when missing it is a reasonable thing and put them on another flight. But that it's like courtesy for, oh, someone just wrote courtesy, like a courtesy
Well,
thing.
what would be wrong with I guess a employer including a courtesy like that for time anything, I guess, but of course it would be.
But I feel like you're not listening, and this is really annoying me. Because on one hand, I've accepted that employers can and should probably engage if the work is not time sensitive, as a general rule, allow for the people coming in to be the time for people to come in to be flexible. I wouldn't say that is for specifically time blindness.
Okay,
Like,
so it's just like an accommodation because a lot of people are late for work or miss work.
I don't think it's accommodation as much as it is a courtesy.
Okay.
Or you can just have a policy because, not because of time blindness, but I don't mind people showing up late, particularly if they can work from home, and what you need to do and when you need to show up. And the work you need to do isn't time sensitive.
Yeah, and that's a different situation anyway, because the flight is leaving whether you're there or not. And then you can get on, I don't know, the next flight, whatever the case may be, when you miss a flight. But like, it's a different conversation if we're talking about the pilot being 30 minutes late. Like, that's two totally different things. Like, the person getting on the flight and missing their flight, the flight is still going to go at whatever time it was supposed to go. But if the pilot's not there, now that's a bigger issue. And now the whole plane is mad versus just the one person was mad because they missed their flight. So it's just two totally different, I think, arguments that aren't comparable. And like, that's the issue that I'm seeing in terms of like the universal accommodation. It seems like people would be okay with it only in one direction, but not in the directions that would affect them. Because like, if you want to go somewhere and they're like, sorry, the pilot's not here, and you're sitting on the plane, I doubt many people are going to be like, you know what, maybe they just needed an accommodation. People are going to be mad. So like, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong for them to be mad. I'm just saying what would actually happen in real life. So I don't know. It's a much more deeply layered conversation than I think some of us might be thinking of it as.
I think it's still in the same conversation. I mean, obviously, we talked earlier about types of jobs where timeliness is extremely important. And I guess the cost analysis or whatever of whatever you call that, where I guess we would weigh these people who are in the flight, their satisfaction, whether or not it hurts business, how profitable or how much of a cut into the company profit it is. I'm sure all of that could be weighed and a decision could be made, I guess, for each individual workplace or company or whatever.
Do you think to accommodate time blindness, we would have to link it to a neurodivergence?
No, that might strengthen an argument if it can be done legitimately, but I don't think it has to be.
So you would say everyone who suffers from time blindness, regardless of neurodivergence, should be accommodated?
Sure, to the degree that the accommodation, they fall under it.
Wait, what?
What do you mean?
I mean, we
There's
talk
no
about
accommodation they currently fall under.
the courtesy or whatever you call it. Like
No,
even
I'm saying no. Because you're taking my point. I believe you should accommodate people, specifically when it's not a detriment to the company. And for me, it doesn't even matter about time blindness. It's, can you do this? Is it detrimental to the business or whatever? Then no, you should do it. Particularly if they don't need to be there to add value. Great. But I'm saying, should everyone who says time blindness be accommodated because of their time blindness?
I'm not sure.
Why are you not sure?
I don't know what the benefit versus cost would be. I don't know if it would create a more productive workplace or a more detrimental workplace. I have no idea if there even is research around it, which I don't think there is.
So your argument then is not to accommodate time blindness? I'm confused because I thought that's what you were arguing this entire time.
I think we can accommodate it. I have been making an argument that I don't know whether accommodating it will be beneficial or costly to the company, to the individual.
So the question again, should we accommodate it?
I don't know. I feel like I've said that throughout the whole conversation.
Wait, I thought you were arguing for accommodating it.
I think you guys, well, at least you were arguing against it. I'm not sure exactly where Kay stands, but I've only been making the pushback that I think we're looking at it in a negative way. And we're not considering, for example, that giving a grace period to someone who's late might encourage them to show up a little less late instead of like missing the whole day or showing up extremely late since they're already late.
But I'm not opposed to that. I'm opposed to it as a resolution for time blindness. Like, if people are showing up late and if people are always late, it's fine to say, well, maybe we should think about what is happening here. Do we need this person here at this specific time? If so, then what are you going to do about this employment? However, if you're saying, I cannot show up on time because of time blindness, that was specifically the question. What should be done, and should that be accommodated when you need someone there at the time?
Because it's a symptom, I don't know if it should be accommodated outside of the courtesy that we all seem to be agreed on. As my company has, and pretty much every company I've ever worked for, do have some types of accommodations. I know for autistic people, maybe people with ADHD, not sure, but you would need to, at that point, you would need to do some work outside of the company to get a diagnosis so that you have it on record, and then they can work around it and work with you. So if you have a sort of diagnosis where this is a symptom of your diagnosis, then maybe that is something a company could work with you on. Outside of that, I think the courtesy is fine.
So wait, I think that may be why people are in the chat saying ableism, because I am not against that. If you have a prescription or your doctor says this is what is happening and you need this accommodation or you can't be there on time, like even if it's like you need therapy before you go to work, for example, this is only one person I know about this, and you have to do that, then yes, I would argue that the employer should accommodate. I'm speaking specifically to the general claim of time blindness, divorce from neurodivergence. That's what I'm talking about. So that's why I'm confused where people are saying, oh, ableism, because like this is not an ableist. Like ableism doesn't come into the conversation, like at all, unless time blindness was neurodivergence, which it is not. It can be a symptom.
Yeah, I think the only way that could like overlap or people can say it's ableism is if we are talking about people who struggle with these things but have not been diagnosed with any, ADHD or autism or anything that would explain why they struggle with it. So I think that could be maybe why some people are saying those things in the comments, but just in general, like what you're talking about, Themis, because I know you're thinking about people who just, maybe they're like, oh, I'll press snooze one more time, and I'm, whatever, like that type of thing. I know that's what you're thinking of, and you're like, just set your alarm and get up earlier. But again, how would you ever draw the line? How would you ever be able to know? And I don't know. I don't see how it can be done. That's why I think kind of like what goes on right now, like, it's case by case. You talk to your employers, you see if you can get an accommodation for something. If it's something that, your therapist or your doctor can back you up on, then try to get them to write you some kind of note, like, work on strategies for yourself. I mean, I think that's all people can do right now. But maybe in the future there will be more accommodations and more ways to accommodate some of these invisible disabilities, like, and mental health, disorders and things like that.
Even
Someone said she was speaking in terms of ADHD. She didn't make that clear in the first video, which we were discussing. After she got pushback, she came back and said ADHD. There's a ton of videos where she contradicts herself throughout the entirety of her TikTok. I'm not saying she's lying about ADHD, but I'm arguing both. If it is ADHD and that your doctor is saying that you don't show up on time, this is a severe problem for you and therefore you need accommodation, I would never argue against the doctor's opinion on that, right? But if that's not a thing, then that's also an issue. When your mother is arguing with you, which is what she said, that she's lazy and she just doesn't want to do this, and why are you bringing this up here? It sounds to me, though I could be wrong, that this was not a diagnosed symptom of her ADHD if she has ADHD, or her mother either doesn't know about the time blindness portion of her ADHD or doesn't care. Either way, the mother seemed to think that she's using this as an excuse. Um, so I'm talking about this not from her perspective only, as someone who may or may not suffer from ADHD, but as a general statement. Time blindness is not just related to ADHD. Every human being can experience time blindness, and we're speaking about it through that lens. Go ahead, Patty.
outside of, I guess, looking into people with type of neurodivergent disorders, right? We could look to study what making time blindness accommodations do. I think we might have talked about on one of the podcast episodes the 4-day work week study that they were doing, which I thought was going to be you work 4 days for 10 hours each. So it's still 40 hours. You just have a longer weekend. But I read more into it, and it was actually they work 4 days, but still 8 hours. So it's just literally a shorter work week, and they have the same pay, which seemed wild to me. But contrary to what I thought would happen, especially with keeping the same pay, it seemed like the companies were pleased, the employees were pleased, performance, productivity, and everything went up. I'm not sure if profits went up. That's what I assume so if companies are like okay with it, or at least stay the same. So it could have, like, again, an unintended positive consequence. So I think it would maybe be worth studying to some degree.
I agree with this, but that's not time blindness, though. I agree with everything
That was
you
just
just
an
said.
example for something that I personally thought would be a flop, but the research came out and said, oh, people are more productive if they work less. People are
Oh, definitely. I
not
agree.
work less, but if they have a shorter work week and like, yeah, so it could be.
I'm a big advocate for that. I'm here for it.
I wasn't an advocate before the study because I thought, well, people are just, you're going to get less out of people if they work less, but apparently you get more. So
Yeah. I mean, I do think, like along that same line of what you were saying, Petty, that there is room to make more what's the word, opportunities, I guess, for people who would fit better into certain situations, like maybe more remote jobs, more jobs that have a 4-day work week, things like that, just so that there are more available positions for people who may struggle with some of these other things that don't necessarily fit into like a strict 9 to 5 Monday through Friday situation. I think that's a way that, you know, people could be more accommodated, because there are plenty of jobs that can be done from your computer at home, but still require people to come into an office for whatever reason. Um, and that's not to say that just because you work from home, you're always going to be on time. Because as a teacher who was there during the remote learning year, like I was not even always on time. And it's just like I literally had to walk to the kitchen table. So I understand, but yeah, just more opportunities for people to have more access to careers that fit their different needs, I think is a good way to, I
If
guess,
I don't have if I don't have an alarm like literally every second of the day and I don't have a schedule, it will not get done.
oh
I
my goodness,
literally
yeah.
I literally need like a schedule. I need everything. And I don't want to, so there is an anti-productivity movement online. I hate it. There is a productivity movement online. I hate it. And I feel like the truth, for me, the sweet spot is obviously somewhere in the middle. It feels like people are like, oh, stop working, unplug from this capitalist system, live your best life. How? How are you going to live your best life if you unplug? I,
Yeah, it's
it
hard.
feels like, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It feels like we're just like overly invested in outrage culture and everything is just outrageous. Now, I have a bias and I'm going to put on this. As someone who comes from a third world country, so-called third world country, um, I have to be cautious that what I see as a privilege might not actually be a privilege, and my over investment in achievement and in some ways perfectionism, but achievement specifically, that I don't make that the rule or standard for everyone else. So I will own that. I will apologize for that, and I will step back from this conversation now. I can say maybe everyone doesn't see this need to like be overly productive in the way that I do, and society should probably conform more to people. Because my society that I come from was even less conformed. They didn't care about anything. So for me, seeing people, all the accommodation feels like it is a lot. So I apologize. I'm shaped by my unfortunate circumstances to begin with. You can respond and we can move on if anyone want to.
I was going to ask, what do you say to the people who say if we do allow accommodations for this, courtesies or anything like that, people will take advantage of it?
Huh?
What say you to people who think that if we make accommodations like this, people will just take advantage of it?
I don't say anything to them, but I do know that if time blindness was a thing that people accommodated or employers accommodated, I would be all up in it. So I am pushing back not because like, oh my God, I hate this. This is bad. I would be in it unless I'm competing with someone else. I'm probably just going to start being late because I don't want to get up out of bed. I don't get up. I get up, go to the gym, meditate, and then go to work because I want to be productive in that. There's some echo. I don't know where that is. Oh, it was K. So I don't engage in that way. Sana Cruz, welcome to the membership. I don't, if people think people are going to abuse it, I can't sit here and say, no, they wouldn't, knowing that I would. I would definitely be one of the people who abuse it. I feel like you were going somewhere with that.
No. I mean, I think people would abuse anything that exists for anybody. So,
yeah,
welfare.
It's not a strong enough. I don't think that's a strong enough deterrence. Like, I wouldn't use that as an argument for against accommodating, right? But I would definitely I mean, I would. I don't want to get up out of bed either, so I feel you. All right. Do you know this man?
Nope.
The basketball player. Well,
Dwight Howard.
Former basketball. He doesn't play right anymore. No.
I don't know. I don't care. What I do care about is, so he was training his son in the gym. I didn't really see anything happening. Like I didn't care about it. Like I saw it on the shade room and I just lived my life and move on. But people sent it to me and I went into the comment section and people were like, yes, teach him how to be a man. Make sure he's a man and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, interesting. Sorry.
What was he doing? Oh, are you showing a clip?
I don't want to show it because I don't want to show the child.
Oh. Mm-hmm. What were they? What was? I didn't see the clip. What happened?
It was just him. The child was crying, and it was like an elliptical thing that the child was on, screaming, and he was like, "Go, you can do it!" Blah blah blah. I'm pushing you to greatness, and the child was crying because he didn't want to continue, but he was pushing him. And I was like, oh, I mean, I don't really care if this is how you engage with your child. This is how you engage with your child. I don't have anything to it. But it was the comments about make him a man. You better man up. Blah blah blah. And I was like, wait, the Dwight Howard. Let's hear what he said about it because let me play what he said. I won't put it on the screen. Never mind, the shade room removed the sound. But he was just explaining why he did it and how he's teaching the boy to grow up or whatever. It is weird. Isn't he the same guy that was like accused of, this is allegedly, SAing or some kind of assault? I'm going to pull it up in a minute. A man.
Recently? When? I didn't hear about that.
I mean, it happened 2 years ago, but then it happened again. There were texts leaked about. There were some texts leaked. I keep forgetting that Twitter is X now, and I didn't
Oh,
know
yeah.
Twitter was X. So I'm not reading these texts, but there were some texts leaked about a guy saying that he tried to get him to do like I'm not. So essentially, the guy was saying he was trying to get him to do get involved with him and two other guys, and they were planning this. So I'm not. What I found interesting is it is weird that there is this like performance of hypermasculinity, and him sort of training the boy up to be a man, while there are these like allegations about him engaging in certain ways, and how the men in the comments are saying you need to train him to be a man. No sisses around here. We don't want no sisses. And it just feel like these. I don't want to make this broad statement that I was about to make, but it seems odd that there is this There's this unwillingness to just kind of own who we are. I'm not saying him, but just generally, just like there's this unwillingness to own who we are. And it just makes conversations weird. And I'm just going to stop talking and someone else can come in.
I think I know how you're thinking in regards to that. Not in relation to Dwight Howard, because I don't know that situation. But sometimes people, like, when they have certain thoughts about things, they like try to go really hard in the opposite direction to I guess kind of deter that type of attention that they're struggling with away from themselves. So like through displays of things like this hyper masculine type of behavior, and again, not having to do with Dwight Howard because I don't know anything about that situation, but I know that that's something that people do. Like they might, have these other traits or desires or whatever the case may be, but then like outwardly try to show something that's total opposite of that so that they won't be judged or whatever the case may be.
Well, that's the question that I wanted to ask you all. Do you think, well, I think I know your answer. Do you think it is harmful? I already know the answer. I don't know why I'm asking this question. It seems really harmful to create a society where people aren't don't feel comfortable being who they are, and we get into these weird situations where people are just lying, and and just causing a ton of trauma for a ton of people, whether that be overperforming masculinity in their minds are literally engaging in abusive behaviors to people because they've externalized. I'm not talking about Dwight Howard. I don't know if any of this is real. This could all be fabricated. I'm not putting it on the screen to say it happened or that it's real. But it feels like we are in a culture that allows for trauma to be perpetuated because people don't feel comfortable in being who they are.
Absolutely. I think that that's the case. And I think a lot of people are also scared or worried about like the consequences of speaking out in an accepting way. Like some people just won't say anything, even though they're like, this or that might be okay to them, but then they don't want to get the backlash that comes with sticking up for certain other people. So like it just becomes like a cycle of just, I don't know, of trauma and nonsense, because it's like if everyone could just, be themselves, of course not harming others or anything like that, but just be able to be comfortable with themselves, and other people could understand like, okay, we're different, but that's cool if that's how you're living. This is okay if this is how I'm living. And that's fine. Like if we could just get to that point, I think things would improve. But I think a lot of people feel like they have a lot to prove to people outside of themselves, so then it just becomes a big issue.
So I get tongue tied on this. I get tongue tied on this issue because what I don't want to do is put a sexuality onto someone. So that's why, by the way, if people are asking me, Petty, what say you before we move to what I believe to be good news?
I have the video. It shows audio for me if you did want to go through him addressing the allegations of his son. But also I did read the New York Post did an article on him and just the gay allegations, whether or not they're true. And his words was something like he just like was seeing hate from people he never met before because he's on the internet. So, and he says it liberated him because he realizes that how I guess gay people would feel operating throughout society with this type of overt hatred towards them, to the point where he alludes to closeted people who might be afraid to be open and be themselves because they're afraid of what other people would think about him. I definitely think the way that he engages with his son kind of it's kind of what's the word? Reminiscent of how, that's not the word, but it's kind of, is it emblematic of what happens in the Black community generally, where we acknowledge that there's a type of overt discrimination against gay men, feminine men, anybody who kind of steps outside of that patriarchal box, right? And instead of creating a world where people can do this openly, I'm going to be extremely aggressive on my son, and I'm going to put him into this type of performative masculinity early so that he can move throughout the community without being discriminated against, right? Like Jamie says on the stream last week, if you are in my neighborhood and openly gay, we will kill you, or openly feminine, we will kill you for being gay or feminine. And he says it very overtly, it's implied, even when it's not overt in the community. So it seems backwards to me. Obviously, I would look for a world, ideally, where you're making it safe for someone to be anything they want to be and move without a fear of being killed or discriminated against. But instead, he's kind of going into that box. And maybe he feels forced into that box, or that his son has to be forced into that box to not suffer what he allegedly has suffered. So, yeah.
Talking away about Jamie, I'm trying to get people together to discuss that Jamie stream, because I do think it is important that I discuss it. So they don't know I'm calling them this, but I'm getting the educated lames together to discuss that Jamie stream, and I'm trying to do it Friday. However, before we go, I actually not before we go, but I agree with you on this. It seems instead of fixing the world, they would rather make sure that people conform to it. So, I mean, to each their own. There was this man who was homeless, and he went back to school to get his high school, to get his, what do you call this? Yeah, high school
GED.
diploma.
The GED.
No, like there's a high school diploma.
Okay.
There's a school in DC, and he became the valedictorian, even though he was homeless for, I think, the last year. I I am not showing this to say pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And I feel weird showing this video because it's going to feel like I'm saying that, but I'm not. So please listen to what I'm saying. I don't know what, maybe Petty or Kay will say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but that's not what I'm trying to say. So let me play this video, and then we'll talk.
Where I live. This was my home for 2 years.
A tent beneath a bridge in Navy Yard. This is where Michael Jeffrey slept every night in the freezing cold winters and blazing hot summers.
I didn't want to be stuck out here. I don't wish this on anybody to be stuck out here.
Jeffrey used to work at Waffle House and a clothing company. He lost both jobs and his home during the pandemic, but he always had hope things would get better.
We don't want pity. A lot of people in this situation is just like me. Like, we want better. We want more.
It's why he enrolled at the Goodwill Excel Center, a free high school for adults. For an entire school year, Jeffrey took classes while still studying and living in the tent.
A lot of people don't get that second chance, and Goodwill allowed that second chance for me, and I appreciate this.
Last week, not only did he get his high school diploma, he did so as valedictorian.
I am proud of you guys.
2 weeks ago, Jeffrey moved out of his tent into an apartment. He's starting at Catholic University in the fall and hopes to eventually attend law school.
I'm studying legal studies. Who would have thought that I would be studying legal studies, right? There was no hope in this tent, but I found it. So you see how far I've came and how far I will get. So, yeah.
A new chapter for this graduate who never gave up.
Let's go.
Amy Cho, News 4.
All right, Prince Petty, I want to hear your reaction to this first.
I think it's great that he's able to educate himself, of course. I wish that the circumstances were better. And of course, when I'm looking at people experiencing homelessness, I'm always going to say not that one person can do it, so there's no excuse for any other person experiencing homelessness or anyone above that, obviously, who would be privileged compared to that person. But rather, what can we do to kind of eliminate situations like this or accommodate people like this so that they don't have to go do something? I think this is extreme. I don't know how y'all feel about it, but how do we make a society where they don't have to do something extreme like this? Yeah.
So there's no part of you that's like, if he can do it, experiencing homelessness, then it feels like you would cut it off there. I wouldn't. And what I'm saying, what I feel is, I feel like we haven't begun to scratch the surface of our own potential if we try harder. But then the question is, who am I to say try harder? And so is saying that sort of mean and disrespectful?
I'm not sure. I think potential should be a choice and not something you're forced into. Of
Wait,
course,
say that again.
I think you showing potential should generally, not a blanket statement, be a choice and not necessarily something you're forced into. Not that I think he's been forced into homeless and someone's like holding him at gunpoint or something, but I do think circumstances can put people in some pretty bad situations.
Themis, I don't think that it's problematic for you to, say that people should, try hard to live up to their potential or anything like that. I think it would only be problematic if there was no understanding for people who are in situations where it's not as easy or accessible to be able to reach their potential or to have access to different things that would help them to be able to do that. So, I mean, just saying it, I don't think it's a problem. Like that.
All right, so let me go a step further and let's kind of get in the discomfort. It would be easy and understandable if you're experiencing homelessness to continue in that homelessness. It takes a kind of tough, and that's why I appreciate this and what he did. It takes a really meaningful mental kind of toughness, I believe, to do what he did, right? If we don't preach this kind of agency, are we potentially losing people by just saying, oh, your experience and the system prevents you from actualizing? If we don't preach the opposite and say, you can do this, are we doing a disservice to people who might have needed to be told they can do it, as opposed to the alternative message of like, you can't in the system? Because I don't think the system is about to change.
I don't think the message is you can't. I think it's an acknowledgement of reality. The difficulty that you're speaking about exists, and it's an incredible hurdle to get over. I don't know how it is to have no permanent address, no perhaps reliable contact info, transportation.
But that's the extreme, right? And that's what he overcame. But like for people who are not like experiencing homelessness yet, but also that, so you can use it. But yeah.
Yeah, for homelessness specifically, I don't know how difficult it could be for limited access to showers or nice clothing, right? Just acknowledging that exists, and that's kind of a difficult, I guess I'll use the word system, not sure if that's the right word, but that's kind of a difficult hurdle to overcome. I don't think means we have to ignore that someone has individual agency, but I don't think touting hard work is, I don't know that that's beneficial, because I don't always know that hard work will overcome any and every situation. Otherwise, I think single moms, for example, would be like doing extremely good, a lot better than the stats show. So
Let me respond. Themis just said the system can change. I didn't say that. I said it's not about to change. And what I mean by that is it's not about to change in a way to accommodate people based on how the system have discriminated against people. But I never said the system can change. I will really watch, but I'm sure I didn't say that.
yeah, and to be overt, we are Black and we talk about Black issues a lot, and affirmative action, for example, has just been rolled back a little bit. So progress is what it is. Yeah. It's not like it's in the near future. So accountability and individual agency is important. It's extremely important, but I wouldn't like throw away the systemic part.
Yeah, and so that's the question then. Okay, so that's the question. How do we, because I feel like nuance is hard to hold. How do we both say do better while also saying the system is a problem and we should try to change it, even though I don't think it's about to meaningfully change?
I mean, maybe we can look to Black women for examples where there's an acknowledgement in Black women that the system is against you. It's not, I don't think Black women like ignore that. I think they fight against it. I think they advocate against it. I think they become lawmaker or Supreme Court justice or whatever and fight against it. And it's acknowledged throughout the Black woman community. But there's also real effort in the community insofar as Black women, for example, now the most educated demographic, now on pace to out-earn the men. And then there was a study from, what was it, Georgetown, where I think it's Georgetown, where we find that when you remove the systemic things, Black women are on par or even outdo white women. So
we didn't even remove the systemic things. It was Harvard and Stanford, but we didn't remove the systemic things. We just started them off at the same level. So when you watch Black women and other races of women, Black women are able to compete with other races of women in the system.
Yeah, so clearly there's something to be learned there. A study should be conducted. Yeah, more studies. Or we can look to that study to see maybe if it has the details in there about how it is that this happens or why.
When you sit with a young man, me, Jamie, who says, I'm not about to change, I'm not doing this, but I said, do you want to replicate yourself? And he says no. The system needs to put money and jobs and remove drugs from the community. It feels like a waiting for the system as opposed to engaging meaningfully with it. I shouldn't use Jamie as an example because I refuse to believe that was a real person, and I will say that person was trolling. But the idea that it has to be top-down change, it feels like we're waiting as opposed to acting. Agency and system again.
Yeah, I mean, I think both things need to happen. Like the encouragement that you were talking about, Themis, like telling people they can do it and like giving them that just, support, I guess, as a community needs to be there. But there also needs to be like social infrastructure there within our community in particular, because like you said, like the system is not anytime soon just going to be like, you know what? This has been very unfair. Let's accommodate, and do all that. Like that's not about to happen anytime soon, for Black people specifically. So like what we can do, like I said, the people who can do better should be encouraged to do better and should be doing better. And then with that, we'll have like a stronger community. And then we will be able to create more opportunities for people who wouldn't have had them. Like, I think that a lot of different things have to be happening all at the same time. And people just kind of have to know their place in that structure. for the betterment of our community in general.
Petty, do you think the Jamie was real? Like, do you think he was being like who he is, or do you think he was playing it up or just trolling me?
I think he's real. I'm from the hood, you can tell.
I don't
So,
believe this.
thug is
All right, let me continue. So, how do you package this message? To me, I'm not asking for myself, but I'm just asking generally. How do you package this message?
to who?
I
People.
think the first step, because I think the problem with some of these messages sometimes is that people just like randomly give out these unsolicited messages to like large groups of people who don't even care about who the person giving the message is. And some people are like, yeah, that's a good message. Some are like offended. It becomes a whole thing. I think the most effective way, especially just as a regular day-to-day person, it's not like you have like, you know, like I'm not saying if you're somebody who has a ton of influence over a bunch of people. I'm talking about just like day-to-day people, with friends, family, regular lives. I think the best way is to just reach the people that you are directly in contact with, and see what change or what inspiration you can give there. What part can you play in the lives, or that social infrastructure of the people that are actually around you, and then like it goes from there. I think that's how you have to do it to make those changes sustainable, because I think sometimes when you just have a broad message to a bunch of people, it kind of gets lost because no one cares about who you are. It's like, okay, whatever, somebody's giving us another message. But if you can connect with someone and like they can actually hear what you're saying and you can follow up with them and y'all can work together, whatever the case may be, I think that's a lot more effective, um, in the long term, in terms of like making those small steps towards something better.
The messages seems like excuses is my problem. The predominant messages seem like excuses. And I'm thinking back to like the Destiny versus FD signifier debacle. But just more than that, just like the acceptable messages seem to highlight our victimhood. And I said highlight because I don't mean make us victim or make us seem like victim. I mean we are victims, but it feels like it just highlights that victimhood as opposed to finding ways to be triumphant, which is why I was like, if we're not gonna get we if ADOs aren't going to get reparations, it would be nice for people with power to just say, look, y'all not gonna get it. And whether or not that would cause people to not wait for it or to be activated in a way to go fight for it. And I don't mean like militantly fight, but whatever. Does that make sense, or am I just being annoying?
So, do you think there's too much focus on identifying the problem and not enough work on like, okay, like now what's next type of thing?
Oh, no, God, no. I want us to identify the problem more. I want us to fight, to know the problem, restate the problem, but even in our victimhood, be triumphant. Um, this is so weird. I shouldn't be saying like be triumphant and still make progress as opposed to waiting. And in some ways, I think we are. Petty just pointed out Black women and the success of Black women, and I feel like if Black women in a patriarchy can do it, and this is a patriarchy, it, it I don't want to say that. It just feels like we're not. Yeah.
So what do you think the cause of that is? Like, why do you think that things are going the way that they're going versus the way that you like potentially see that it should go, I guess, in your opinion? Like, what's the cause?
Excuses. I think explanations are good, excuses are generally bad. Um, it just feels like, in the way that we're having the earlier conversations, when we find a reason for why something is, we lean into it and we use it as a reason for why we shouldn't and don't and won't move forward, as opposed to recognizing its existence and saying, despite of this, or even because of this, I am going to take the next few steps. And I will own that, like, I am fearful now of my messaging, because, like, it's not that, like, I want to just say the truth and hurt people. I think how you say things matter and you should care about people. But like, it it feels like, in an effort to care about emotions, that we are sidestepping, like, just get up and do it. Um, and I don't mean like ignore people's plight, but it feels like, I've said it feels like so much. You know, I'm monitoring my language. Um, it's like, I don't believe that I am super smart. I think I'm average intelligence who works hard. So I if this is true, that means the people around me, not around me, but the people who come online, even Jamie, if they put enough effort, they could far outdo what I am doing, which would be nothing to them. And while I do agree that capitalism requires a floor, a bottom class, an underclass. Again, I've said this so many times, it doesn't have to be the people who look like me. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but I hope it did.
It does. I think the part that, because I get where you're coming from, like, there needs to be more grit, right? Like, people have to just be like, okay, I know this is going on, but I have to do this because that's just what needs to happen. And I get that point of view, but like, where does that grit come from? It's kind of like, there are so many people who, like you said, with the person that you were just referring to, um, might be really intelligent or might uh be really good at doing certain things, but it's just not necessarily directed like in the right way. So like, how does that happen if you don't have the social, I keep saying social infrastructure, but if those supports aren't around you, how does it just happen? I know some people just like,
That's no. The funny thing is, because of that question, is why I played the video of Michael Jeffrey graduating after being homeless as valedictorian.
right, which is an extraordinary situation. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, survivorship bias, right? Like, we can talk about the one person, not literally one, but the more rare cases where someone is like triumphant in a situation like that, but for every one person like that, there are how many other people that didn't go that direction. So like, yes, absolutely possible, for these things to happen, but those people are more few and far between than the people who don't go in that direction. It's kind of like how a lot of people think struggle makes you better and all this, but really, people who go through certain like adverse experiences end up having worse outcomes in general than people who don't. But it's like, we have this thing in our head that like struggle causes you to do better when that's not necessarily true. So like, I don't know. I think we just kind of look at it in a way where it's not really given a clear picture of what's actually happening. And we use like these extraordinary examples like, well, if they did it, then everyone can do it. But it's like those examples are not the norm.
But Jamie said, I don't think people keep asking me what is my motivation. I don't fully think it's about my motivation. I think motivation matters and it's super important. But Jamie said, I don't plan ahead. When he said that, I was like, and you're still here. You said you have a job, you have your place. Imagine if you planned. You know, you know what I mean? And I'm wondering how many people are like that, where they're like, yeah, I don't plan. Like, planning, what is that? Who is she?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think lots of people are like that. Like, I think most people are not extraordinary naturally. Like, most people just get by day to day, do what they need to do, and that's it. So, and I'm not saying that's bad or whatever. That's
I
just
mean, it's not bad. I feel like most people I've met at the top aren't extraordinary either. They're not even smart. Well, they're not even that smart. Um,
but they probably have a difference unless it's, some other situation. But like there's probably a difference in terms of like work ethic. Like, you're not going to meet somebody who graduated medical school and passed all their boards and became this whatever accomplished physician that just is lazy. Like, they're not get to that point without.
Someone said he's in survival mode. That's what I'm saying. How do we move from like sort of survival mode into like living and accomplishing and like
Right.
making decisions for the future us? Like, even when I make PowerPoints, this would be a great example. Like, when I'm playing PowerPoints on my Friday live stream, I will say, like, if something is up and I forgot what the next slide is, I'd be like, oh my God, I hope I had the other slide. And when I go to the other slide and I have the information that I was like, I hope I have this information, I literally remember me making the PowerPoint thinking, let me do this for future themes. Like, I'm going to include this for future themes just in case he forgets it. And then I'm on the live stream and I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had that. And then I had it. And so, like, it feels like there isn't the when he said I don't plan, I actually did get upset for the first time doing that live stream. But it was like, how do you not plan? And how do you not see the correlation? Well, there's a causal connection between planning, I think, and good outcomes. Now, you can choose to not plan and you still can have good outcomes, but that is so unlikely that it like the causal connection is so obvious to me.
I mean, wouldn't the obvious answer be to make an environment where you don't need to survive? Even like the language I listen to Black women speak about in their back and forth with Black men online, about why aren't you smiling when I walk down the street? Why aren't you submissive and all of this? Well, you haven't really fostered an environment for me to do that. And then once I meet the right man who allows me to rest in my femininity, I'm able to do that. Or even you brought up a study on welfare or something that showed that people, when they were given resources, were less likely to commit crime or steal or something like that, because there's no need to go out and wreak havoc for the sake of making money if I have money. So I think to some degree, maybe, again, we can look to the system to see what the system can do. But of course, infinite welfare doesn't exist. And at some point, there does need to be an individual input and effort. But could it be that the barrier between getting to that effort is actually something systemic?
Getting to the mindset.
Yes. How do I get out of a survival mindset? First, I need to be in an environment where I no longer need to survive. And then once there, I think.
Do you think that is true? Because there are people who come from those environments who who change their mindset. And I don't think success is only about mindset, by the way. So let me just put that out there. But I just wanted to ask that.
What's the question?
aren't there people who come from these areas who change their mindsets while in
Yeah.
those areas?
Yeah, I think even the research showed that. I'm trying to think of that study again. The upwards mobility showed that wasn't it like black men, for example, who came from high poverty areas actually did better than low poverty areas. So, or no?
No, but they tend to fall out of doing well. So you remember how we were citing the study from Harvard where it was a longitudinal study where they follow black women and black men and white women. And they found that black women, when they were competing with white women, but they start at the same socioeconomic bracket, they do as well, if not better, than white women, even in the system. But you said it's a survival mindset because of the environment. But what black boys, when they are at the same socioeconomic level in middle class and upper middle class with white men, they tend to fall out and drop into the lower percentile, or quartile, more than their white counterparts, and more than white black women, and more than everyone else.
Was the conclusion, if I remember, about black fathers or about the community having a lack of fathers generally, or a lack of men?
Communities having a lot of fathers, but even for the communities where there were fathers, black boys tend to do poorly,
Okay.
poorer than everyone else.
Well, I mean, if you attempt to, was there still disproportionate incarceration, anything like that at higher levels of, well, less when you're less impoverished, and even with fathers in the community, is there still like a disproportionate incarceration? I'm
I
looking
don't
into
think
any
they,
systemic thing I can think of.
yeah, no, I don't think they did incarceration, but the other studies show that where there is a strong father present in a community, not necessarily the home, that incarceration rates go down for young boys, black boys.
Okay. I mean, well, if you've explained away any systemic reason, obviously that's not every
I mean,
community.
still there's racism, just the
Yeah,
general sort of racism.
but that will still be something black women face, and they're able to
Yeah.
succeed. So, unless racism affects black women and men differently, which I'm sure it does to some degree, I'm not sure to what degree and whether or not that can be used to explain it away. But to the degree that you can explain away the systemic reasons, then yeah, all you would be left with is personal agency. So
Yeah.
I don't know how to motivate someone if there's nothing pushing back against them. Well, there's racism, but
What motivates you to be a janitor?
I have no motivation.
I thought you went to janitor too.
Yeah.
You just do it.
Yep. I like living comfortably. That's it. I just like living comfortably.
Isn't
So
that
the
a motivation?
the money motivates you.
Living comfortably, yes. Not the money, living comfortably. Because if they paid me in rent and food, and I would be completely fine. So the money, because it's capitalism and all that. So yeah, money. What does Mr. Krabs say? Money, money. Ack, 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 ack.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Kay, go ahead, close us out.
So, I was gonna ask you, Themis, because I don't think you have one of those like pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentalities.
Nope.
I don't think you do at all. But I think like the way that you talk about certain things reminds me a lot of my dad, who's Nigerian, and I think that like there's like a different perspective that people who are not born in America have that's like different than a lot of people who are. Would you say that that's true? Like in terms of like this conversation while you were talking, I was like, man, he sounds like my dad. And sometimes like me and my dad don't see eye to eye about like certain things because he's less understanding about certain things than I am in terms
I
of
think
topics like this.
I think I wouldn't make it as general as like mindset from is different generally, but I will say that when I came to the US, when I was in Jamaica, I didn't really see any real opportunities. The Jamaicans are gonna kill me. I didn't see any real opportunities. And when I came to the US, it felt like I could do or be anything. And even with racism, like I was like, I don't care. Because like you can't stop me kind of thing. But like as the older I got and the longer I was around certain groups of people, I was like very aware of it, and it made me really uncomfortable being in certain spaces. Um, but like I kept going because like I keep measuring my access in America to my access in Jamaica, and my access in Jamaica was non-existent.
Yeah.
And so like I was like, I can go to school, I can go to university, I can study whatever I want. I can I always have this, and I can become an attorney, and like I just like, oh my god, I can do all of this. And so it just kind of felt like there is no way, there is absolutely nothing anyone is going to do to prevent me from getting to that end goal because I'm going to do it. I don't care how. And then my mom was like, yep, you're definitely going to do it. Um, but then I realized in Jamaica, like I constantly compare my access in the US to my access in Jamaica. And I
Mhm.
didn't have access in Jamaica.
Right.
Someone said all of those access were in Jamaica. I couldn't see them, so no, this is a lie. Let me not actually play with this. This is a straight up lie. The access you have in the US is not in Jamaica. That is a lie. They're not even on par. Don't do that. It is an absolute lie.
Yeah. Yeah. There are definitely differences between the
Yeah.
access that you're going to have here in America versus certain other places. And I think that has a lot to do with people's mindsets around opportunities and things like that. And I think it's just hard to um be on the same page sometimes because it's just totally different like mindsets that people are coming into the situation with. And one is like, man, some of the places that people might complain about here are still way better than what anybody could ever dream of having access to in certain other places. So it's just I think it's just a totally different mindset that people have. But I think that it's good to have these conversations so that there can be more understanding, because ultimately we all want the same thing for our community, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, I mean, that's
I
what it is.
see, man, stop playing. You keep saying access, but I said opportunities to study law and become a lawyer. How many law schools are in Jamaica? Please let me know. How many of them are in there? Now tell me how many law schools are in the US. They are not the same kind of access and or opportunities. Now, even if you want to go, can you afford to go to school in Jamaica? If you can go to school in Jamaica without paying, let me know. If you can get loans in Jamaica to go to school, please let me know. Now compare that to the kinds of loan. Now I don't like the interest in the loans in the US, but compare that to I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. You are lying. You're lying. Mm-mm.
So you think I should take a loan out?
I think you should think about whether or not you take a loan out.
Yeah.
Themis, we lack in resource, but you can't say there isn't enough opportunities to become a lawyer. What? Look, I want to defend my Jamaica too. My country, I love Jamaica. I want to defend it, but I'm not about to sit up here and lie to defend. Like I'm not doing that. Go ahead, Petty. What did you say? You think you should take out a loan?
Yeah, just like I can. So
I mean, if I want to do something, there's nothing that's gonna stop me. I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna go.
My confirmation.
Hmm.
I'll put you in the memo.
Girl, no.
Taking out the loan. You're gonna take out a loan, Betty.
Yeah, I mean, I have confirmation. We call it divine confirmation. Another divine confirmation is when people watch the video, they can leave a like on it and subscribe if they're not already.
Oh yeah, like and subscribe.
Let's go into the after show so we can be messy. All right, let's hear. Cover your ear. If you are having a headphone, this is not going to be fun.
I didn't mean to reveal it today, but I guess now you guys know I'm from the hood. How do you feel?
What do you mean?
What?
Gang, gang, and all that stuff. Ugh. It's not what's on me, it's what's in me.
What's in you?
What's in
The thug spirit. Thug shaker. Y'all should know what that is.
People said to ignore this person. I want to, but a different struggle doesn't mean no opportunity. Who said there were no opportunities? Did I say there was no opportunities in Jamaica?
No, you said the access is different or something like that.
All right. Yeah.
What's my gang sign?
Seems if I made a beat for you, would you replace it with that? Hey, look, I will take anything I can get. Yes, I will. Send it to me. I can't believe people are literally dying on the hill that Jamaica has the same kind of access. Because I did, as America, in terms of school and law school specifically.
I mean, I'm finding out today that people believe that Black people's lives wouldn't have been better without slavery. It would have just been different. So,
Are you good? Were you getting taught in Florida?
No, Kim Clacklick or something like Classic. I have no idea how to pronounce her name. She was talking to Mark Lamont, and I've seen recent. Oh yeah, that is in Florida, huh? They're trying to introduce school teaching about the benefits that African American had under slavery, because it wasn't all bad, and some people had opportunities. Some of the masters taught their slaves to read. You know, we never hear about that. The left doesn't want you to know that.
Oh
yeah, God. These people play too much. They're just like literally playing in our faces. From Oyster, all of them just playing in our faces, and I don't like it. Meanwhile, we are over here fighting about the wrong things.
Yep.
Anywho, Adrian, stop lying. Jamaicans, we leave Jamaica for access. You're playing in our faces. Don't do that. Don't sit here and lie to these people. Have people running to Jamaica talking about there is a brain drain in Jamaica, and the cause of that brain drain is that the people who have the resources and want the education and have the I'm not going to say that, leave for better access. So stop lying. Like, you literally are in the US. Why weren't you? You know what? Let me leave that alone. Anywho, those are my final words. Do y'all have any final words?
No, I think I've said them.
Thank you. Ready.
Y'all can leave a like on the video. Share it with your friends.
Oh, yeah.
We're coming back harder and better than ever next month. Starting next week, we're gonna get really into it. So I'm very excited. Um, we just had to close out this month with something boring enough. I appreciate you all for coming. Thank you so much. Have a great night. I will be checking in with the Discord after because I have a fight that I want to get into about what we talked about earlier because I'm confused. Bye.
Have a good night, y'all.
I never said that. Bye.